Welcome to Gray Areas for December 3rd, 2024, episode 650, which is not really a milestone when you've done this many. 50 was 150, maybe 250, and then we're just cut off.
Right.
If you're on the video side of things, a couple things are different. One, we're not live, although I'll probably do this as a premiere, so there will still be a live chat, but I can't respond to it. I can't see you. I don't know where you are. Because we're recording these in advance, like the last couple of years, we've realized one nice thing to do for the holidays is still put out episodes and not skip any. But we did a big tier list last year, and 2 years ago, we did a revitalization of our best games ever list. That was a 10-year, decade later update, and it went really well, actually. I'm happy with how it turned out. And we're doing that again. This time in 2014, we did the best video game characters ever. We did male and female lists. The end results of these are very different than those, much more different than the best games ever list is, so we'll get to those later in the month. Today, we had to kind of reorder things. I think I had said we were going to start those this week, but Dave had a thing. So instead, we're going through the thing we haven't done before, which is the best villains in video games of all time.
Cool. That's going to be great. Yeah, Dave was too busy fucking watching, YouTube videos or some shit. So he's gone.
Shitty college football. That's
Oh, you're going to watch the football game. Okay. Well, have fun with that and your shitty ASU team. So Maisie has replaced Dave.
Yeah.
Possibly permanently.
Well, no,
We'll
I replaced Cody. Michaela replaced...
Well, no, because Cody was never going to do this one.
Oh, that's
Unless
fair.
he puts his creative characters as the best characters and villains of all time in his football games. So Michaela was just going to join either way. You're
true.
officially replacing Dave.
Yay!
And again, this is your dress rehearsal for just permanently replacing him, I think.
Wonderful. I think I will knock your socks off.
Okay.
Wow.
Big words. Bold statement.
For one, I'm punctual. Two, I'm friendly.
Huge win. Punctual.
I don't
Punctual.
have kids either.
Huge change.
Now, you have to be prepared because I can tell you right now, there's at least one entry in the top 25 that only you voted for.
Great.
So
I'm excited. I don't know who
Great.
it is.
you're going to have to, I'm not going to say justify it because that sounds like it's negative, but you're going to have to be the one to back it because it's your vote, so you better be ready.
I told her I don't want to hear the phrase because she's replacing Dave, actually, and it's very much a Daveism for the insight to be, I don't know what that is. Just across the board. And so I told her, I don't want to hear, I don't know who that is. If you don't know it, just stay quiet.
I have my laptop to look people up.
Oh,
just
that's
in
a great
case.
idea.
So,
I like that.
I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go.
I must prove I'm better than Dave.
I was going to say, you're already doing more work than
Yeah.
Dave, so you're already winning.
Now,
Damn, we're 3 minutes in. We've dunked on Dave 37 times already.
right. And he can't even respond to this for
I
a
know.
while, so that's... I wish I could get this list to zoom out. Why can't I scroll when I'm zoomed in? I can only see the top 16 this way, which is really annoying. Real quick, we got to go over honorable mention. We have to kind of fly through this list because we're doing it all in one episode. You can see the timeline on the right-hand side. If you're watching, we're going to break each of the other lists in half so we have more time to talk about each of the characters. Villains, however, we have to go fast. So what I can tell you is top 25 is all set. Michaela's going to be on the defensive for the very first entry. We'll get to that in a second. Dave
Oh, God.
put in his votes this morning, and it did change things, including
Okay.
making me do another hour and a half of work.
That's
But-
what has changed.
Besides that, it also booted out what would have been number 25, so I'll tell you the last
Oh.
person out, and then also some honorable mentions that didn't make it. The last person out, which was kind of sad for me, was Dahlia Hawthorne.
Oh. Damn. And she was almost on my
Damn.
list, too. But I did Miles. I was like, I can't do more than one Phoenix Wright character. And I went Miles, and I could have done Dahlia because the single greatest villain in the, I think, single greatest game of the series deserves a lot of credit.
Unfortunately,
He is pretty.
yeah, I have these little fun pro con things on each slide because I didn't have as much data to put on the right hand side as I used to, and hers was very pretty and then pretty evil or something was the pro and con because boy, I mean, as far as evil, there's not a ton of characters on this list that are worse than her. She gets so many people killed. She's got nothing but hatred inside of her. So I was happy to see Michaela had it on her list. For a moment, we had cracked the top 25. We are now 26.
God damn it. Well, and what I love about her is she's the type of character that you're like, well, when characters just trust, Phoenix is always I'm going to trust my defendant. He was always doing that. And you're like, yeah, you should trust her. And then you absolutely shouldn't. She's so manipulative. She's a villain that spans generations of characters. Good choice. I'm really sad she was in the top 25. I didn't vote for her, so I'm partially to blame.
Wow.
But I'm gonna blame Dave more. So
She's the one who fell out.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because she would have been there. Yeah, that does make me sad because she's great. And like when I think of that game, I think of her and just what a good villain she was in a way that I don't know if other games have quite captured that level of villainy. It's brilliant.
No, because like the Elder Edgeworth is evil, but not anywhere the same. And like there's a couple other folks that are really manipulative or conniving, but man, you love to see her suffer when the time finally came. Other votes that received, other characters that received multiple votes and did not crack the top 25, all the way down in 50th, despite getting 3 votes, is Stephen Armstrong.
Oh, wow.
I
the
voted for him.
Senator of Colorado.
That's right.
Metal Gear Rising Revengeance.
Yay! I was like,
Nanomachine,
Now,
son.
one of the great, if we were listing best boss music, he might be top 10. But we're not. It's just villain. And he's great and campy and all of that. And it's just hilarious saying his name even.
Right.
Yeah.
Ridley was 45th with 3 votes, but still, again, just nothing that added up to enough points to even come that close. Another one of my votes, but not very high for me either, so I can't be super sad. Pyramid Head, both Maisie and I voted for, got 2 votes, finished 41st.
fuck yeah, nice, Chris.
Where I'm like, is there any depth to it? No, but I also voted for Nemesis, and they were like my last 2 entries because I'm like, look, do they have depth? No, but they're fucking good villains.
they're scary
good
as fuck,
villains. They're a
exactly.
force of nature that define the game and move the
Yeah.
plot along.
I had
Yeah.
nightmares about Pyramid Head when, like, literally I was playing through original Silent Hill 2 with Sean, like, being his map, and just the fucking load screen with Pyramid Head gave me nightmares.
Yeah.
So he's terrifying.
Yep. Arden from 15 got 2 votes. That's Shauna Michaela.
Nice.
And Bison from Street Fighter got 2 votes. That's me and Carrie, the longtime listener who was nice enough to join us again. She did do this 10 years ago, so
Nice.
she's part of the
Oh,
update, not
nice.
even just part of like one or the other.
Arden is challenging because you really need all the extended media to really show what a great villain he is. And it's out
Yeah.
there, so it's not like, but yeah, that one's tough. I'm glad he's on the honorable mentions list.
I like his character design. I
Yeah.
just thought he looked really cool.
His design is great.
We have a few different Sean and Michaela vehicles that did not make the cut because no one else voted for them. Felix from Golden Sun, Edelgard from Fire Emblem, Delita from War of the Lions.
God,
three
like
of
all those
those.
characters
damn.
have in common, they're like the friend turned antagonist. So Michaela and I have a type, I guess.
Yes, we do.
That's cute.
Dave and I voted for Seymour from Final Fantasy X. Mine was bottom 5, so it didn't get enough traction. Dave's was decently high. But he didn't make the cut. He was 32nd. Me and Sean paired up for a couple of the top 30 that didn't make the cut, which is Virgil and Miles Edgeworth, you already mentioned.
Yep.
I was a little surprised not to see Virgil make it, but again, nobody else but the 2 of us voted for him, so...
Well, and you know what? It's been like even Devil May Cry 5. It's now even that's been years, so he's kind of been off the radar for a bit. But yeah, I think he's great.
And then one other character got 3 votes and did not make the top 25. This was 27th, so right after Dahlia, and that's Micah Bell.
Oh yeah, what a piece of shit. That's
Oh,
all there is to say about that guy. Red Dead 2,
Red Dead, yeah.
fucking asshole. But yeah, although I was gonna vote for Dutch and I ended up not. And he's like more of the villain that makes an impression. So I don't know what happened there, but anyways,
You messed up. That's what happened.
yeah.
So let's go into the proper top 25, and we'll kind of breeze through the first maybe 10 or so, just because, again, time. But normally we could maybe go into this more, but we have the whole month dedicated to this, and again, with all the character stuff, it's just, can't do it. Now, 10 years from now, when we do the villains again, and Dave is texting me, talking to me about plans for next week, so this is already going to be...
Shut up, Dave.
Sorry, I got interrupted.
You've been replaced.
Get to make plans.
Right.
Go fucking
You
watch
blew it.
ASU.
You had your chance. He's still going to assert his will in this episode, though. We'll get to that in a minute.
Love it.
Number 25, I warned Michaela she'd be on the spot, so Kuja, go.
Oh my god. Kuja, he is a great villain from Final Fantasy IX.
Period.
He's introduced early
All
on.
right, great.
And and he's great. He has a really interesting arc where he kind of goes like really crazy and he he's just iconic, and the connection to Zidane. How spoilerific do I want to get here?
And I want to jump into, so I can speak to Kuja too. And I think so anytime you have a character, a villain who's tied to the protagonist, that's a great start. They can serve as a foil. They have a shared background and grief and all of that. So them both being from the fucking whatever planet, and designed to be a killer, they both deal with that in different ways. Kuja loses his mind completely.
Mm-hmm.
But then they kind of like team up at the end, sort of. He like helps him like escape or whatever. So there's still that like compassion. You kind of relate to why he's gone off the deep end. And his entrance is, I think, super iconic. The first time you see him walking off the dragon, pretty fucking cool.
In the rain
with that song.
Music.
Yep.
So
I do like Kuja's theme.
Because that's the one that's like,
really
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The drums. It's good shit. Yeah.
Good shit.
That's
He's
so
great.
cool. Man, if only Final Fantasy IX was just better, I would have gone to that part.
Excuse you.
You're in the minority big time on that one.
Yeah, even I recognize it's great, even though it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
As a quick note, I guess this is a good chance to point out only one vote for this. We had a panel of 7.5 people because one of the followers of our channel also chimed in and their points counted as well. But it's a third. So it only made it to number 25, but it does show you that we're not going to go into what all the points are, but they're very top heavy. So first place vote's worth 100, and it scales down all the way down to the last 21 to 25 are all worth 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 points.
But
so,
this, to me, is not like a Beetle racing adventure vote or whatever that Gary did. I think Kuja has a case for the list.
Yeah.
It was on my first cut. Not my second, but still. Certainly deserving. No qualms with it. And again, this shows the strength of how far we've come, and we're going to see this a lot in the other character lists with we've had a lot better storytelling in video games over the last decade than we did prior to that. And the villains list reflects that too. Number 24 is incumbent upon me to explain.
Okay, please do.
Emmett Selk from Final Fantasy XIV.
Okay.
In my top 4, which is why it's this high and has this many points from only one vote. There's a few different stragglers, only one vote. The top 15 has a lot more consensus to it. It's just the way it happened to break down. It's kind of weird. Again, a lot of the things that we had to get 2 or 3 votes just didn't happen to get enough points to make it because they were all bottom 10 for people. Usually some of those creep in there. They just accrue enough points, and this time it didn't work out that way. Emmett Selk is beloved by anybody who's played through 14 because he's your classic, tragic villain who you can see how they got the way they are, but you can't necessarily use that to justify their actions. And the benefit of going through both Shadowbringers and Endwalker is that you get to see this from 2 different perspectives, essentially. You get to see the fucked up version of him first. I mean, when he first shows up, we don't know he's a villain, but eventually it becomes pretty clear he's just kind of a bad guy. And then in the following expansion, you go into all the different reasons why he became that way, and the final days driving everybody crazy, and it's this fracture between very close friends that are supposed to be aligned on things, and it all ends up making sense. I don't even want to go into it a ton more because people who know, and those who don't. But the fact that he can basically show up and do a little hand wave, the classic, I had to face the other direction to do it right for Japan, but that little, dismissive kind of hand wave, and everybody's like, oh, that's him, even when you can't see who it is, he's in robes like an Organization 13 guy. He made an impact on anybody who's played 14, and he's a large part of why Endwalker is so successful.
So he doesn't get the Walter White treatment where you see the beginning of the downfall, but eventually they go to show you kind of how he became the way he is.
Yeah, because he's a normal guy for the most part, as normal as he can be given his abilities and whatnot and the powers the people of Elpis had. But he's, seems nice enough, friendly enough, smart, maybe a little too smart for his own good, loyal. That also ends up working against him a bit. And then eventually you watch him descend into madness as everything is taken away from him and the world is fractured and his version of the world is destroyed, and he eventually ends up having to pretend to be somebody else and have a kid, and it just becomes a whole mess. So
you said, the pro is seeking discovery, so it just seems like he's kind of curiosity, but it sounds like that was his downfall.
Essentially, he also traveled the world quite a bit. He encourages the protagonist to do that in some of his dying words towards the end. He was all about that stuff, but eventually he got twisted up in his own anger issues, and that's why the con is resentment, because
Classic.
that loyalty becomes a negative when it's too focused and too singular-minded, and it comes at the expense of, I don't know, everybody else.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like
That is
watching
cool.
that like whole like from beginning to end.
Yeah,
sort of
when
thing.
somebody's like, I'm evil.
It's
I
like,
was born
why?
evil. You're like,
Right.
Okay.
Which is fine, and some characters actually pull that off. Well, I don't need everybody to have a redemption arc. If anything, I think JRPGs go to it too often,
Fair.
Yeah.
but that one is one that's exceptionally well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 23 is Xemnas. That's mostly a Michaela vehicle, but I also voted for him.
He's the hot one. I'm just kidding.
He is probably
he's
the hottest,
also, I
yeah.
think, the most. He probably is, and he's the most interesting of all the Xehanorts, all the iterations. He actually has. There's some kind of irony there with them, quote unquote, not having hearts, and yet he is in some
Yeah.
ways more fleshed out and more emotionally interesting than the other
The
ones.
nobody is the most interesting one. And because he's like relatable. He's like, I was basically like, I was born to, like, I'm not supposed to exist. I'm just trying to find, like, to become human. And everybody else, like, I want to, like, rule the world. I want all the power. And this guy's like, I just want to, like, kind of exist officially. And I think that's really interesting. It makes him the most interesting Kingdom Hearts villain, in my opinion.
That's true.
He's also the one I hate the
Yeah.
most, which I thought would be Xehanort, especially the older version of him, because he's just annoying and like he just wanders around with his stupid posture and all that stuff until he finally like lets loose. But Xemnas in particular, I was going back and I was watching the scene where Roxas comes back in 3, and everything Xemnas does in that scene prior to that moment for about 10 minutes is just him being an absolute douchebag. The pretense is gone. He's just like super bitter at this point, like. And this is the development of all the games to that point. He wasn't always that way. But I'm like, man, if there's anybody I want to get their comeuppance, I think it's Xemnas over Xehanort, and that feels weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah, but that
Yeah.
means something, right? Like, he
Yeah.
generated emotion, and that's a sign of a good villain.
And I hate his voice, but it's really good. So it's not like I don't
Yeah.
like the
I was gonna say,
I don't dislike the work. It's just very deep and gravelly, and he always sounds kind of bored and evil at all times. You're like, cool,
Makes him sexier.
I can work with that.
yeah, he sounds very. I like what his voice actor does with the role. I think he's the best one of like the deep gravelly. Well, I mean, not better than Billy Zane, but that's doesn't.
I
Really
mean,
count.
he's Billy Zane.
Right. That was unfair. And if they had known what was going to be ahead of them, maybe they don't cast Billy Zane for that, or maybe they try and lock him up long term like they did some of the others involved there. Because there's some other big names, you know, David Gallagher and everybody else who's involved with the series.
Yeah.
Hayden Panettiere, etc. Haley Joel. But
Yeah.
since they had to lose him, his replacement's been very good, and it also helps him stand out because that's a very distinct voice. When you hear that show up, you're like, which organization member is that again? Like,
Yeah.
is that Demix? I don't know.
Exactly.
And visually, I mean, and you said the lightsaber hands kind of as a joke, but I mean, for real, he makes one of the more visually interesting boss fights.
yeah.
I'm kind of
His boss fight is so good.
Yeah, to be
That was
honest, of
fun.
like the huge, like the boss fight being some giant, gross creature, which Rebirth did, which Kingdom Hearts did multiple times. It's like
Yeah.
just him being like, I just am a guy with lightsaber hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool.
I got this weird white and black outfit, and now I'm going to shoot
Right,
1,000 laser
yeah.
beams at you, and you're going to mash triangle till your finger falls
Yeah.
off,
Yup.
Yep.
Yeah.
which I also
Triangle
hated.
and X. You gotta do
But
both.
it represents the desperation well. It was also just the culmination of too many
Yes.
quick time events. It was like one last slap in the face for the road.
Good vote.
Number 22
Eggman.
was, I think, 24, but Dave also added him to the list. Nobody voted for him super high, but Dr. Robotnik makes the list here, and I think this is nice. I think in part, our impression of him is a little more favorable after Jim Carrey's take, which is not necessarily fair because this is our video game villain list, but there's blurring the lines here. We've got characters from books, we've got characters from TV that have ended up in video games on this list, so working in reverse feels fair. I mean, look, is he like the best at what he does? No, but I like that he can alternate between fun and serious, and neither one feels out of place.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is the first example on this list that I wanted to touch on this year, especially when I voted for all the characters and the villains. I prioritized character over being iconic, but I think being iconic does still play a part. And so Robotnik, I think, is he a great character? No, it doesn't have like a character arc or anything. But certainly iconic. Everybody knows him. Everybody recognizes him. And when you break it down, like enslaving like God at this point, all the animals on Earth, and turning them into robots, like that's pretty fucked up. So yeah, I think he deserves a place there. I don't mind it.
What's fun is he ends up being a foil. Sometimes he's not even all that serious. Sometimes he's like a minor stepping stone.
Mhm.
Sometimes he joins the heroes because there's some other greater threat that needs attention. So he's malleable. But I think unlike another main like big time villain on this list, it's Bowser. Bowser's somewhere on the list. I feel like you can take him seriously still, whereas Bowser, you're like, okay, but you're not actually going to pull this off.
Yeah. Agreed.
Number 21 is technically tied with number 20, but I put number 20 above number 21 because that was how I would have done it. So I was the tiebreaker.
All right.
21
Ah.
is Heimdall from God of War.
He's so scary.
So what's cool about Heimdall is to me he was the most interesting boss of Ragnarok because he felt so insurmountable. His whole thing is like he can see the future, which Norse mythology, Heimdall being able to see everything. That's how they kind of played into him. And so you're probably spending half the game trying to be like, how are we going to beat this guy? And then when it finally culminates in the fight where you're going against them, not for the first time, but the first time is Kratos. It's just really fucking cool. And I think it's the most emotion personally that you feel, as far as like getting hyped, that you feel in that entire game. And also he's smarmy. So it's not just his power. He plays a huge role in that game. And I think he's the most interesting bad guy in the entire game.
Yeah. He's like so scary. And so obviously like in the image, you're Atreus playing, and like the whole time, like you as Atreus, you're like, oh, fuck me. Like the moment I say the wrong word, he's gonna fucking snap my fucking spine like it's a toothpick.
So you're undercover at this part in the game.
So scary.
You're pretending to be aligned with Odin. But like Heimdall sees right through you. And so it's a very tightrope walk that you have to do. And he's just great. And if you go to punch him, he like just laughs at you because he hits you away. And
yeah. And I think Michaela watched me play the actual battle with Kratos against him.
Yeah.
And I was like, ah! The whole time losing my shit. It was so good.
Yeah.
So good.
It was really well done.
Good.
Interesting look, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we think of Heimdall from, say, the MCU, very different. And in this case, the game designers are like, yeah, we want him to have the most punchable face possible. And I'm like, oh, you succeeded.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and they matched that with the most punchable personality possible, too.
Such a douchebag.
Yeah. He's great. But,
so
he drives home the whole idea that, like, Kratos is fighting, like, just being a killer. That's, like, his whole character arc. And Heimdall brings that to the forefront. In a couple different ways. So the role he serves in the story and how punchable he is really left an impression.
Which means he was also tied, technically, with number 20, who the person who voted for that second on their list, and we're the only person to vote for them, is not here, but Sean already alluded to him, which is Dutch. Now, this is a Dave vote, but I'm kind of glad he ended up here because both Sean and I think this character is very good.
Yes.
And so, like, we didn't have space for him, especially because Sean went for Micah. Micah was one of my last ones off. Dutch was a little further down. In this particular case, though, I mean, I think in particular, Dave likes the first game almost as much as the second. I kind of like the first one more than the second, even though the second one's better. So that's where I think Dutch really gets his time to shine because, he's, I wouldn't say the main foil of either game, really, but he's involved heavily in both. And he gets a chance to shine. And it's sort of weird because, again, you get to see him backwards. You see him sort of already off the rails in RDR1, and then you see how he got there more so in 2.
And that's really what made an impression was he starts the game. Yeah, he's leading a gang, but he seems like a pretty rational dude. And then I think I remember, I don't remember exactly what it was, but something happened, like he hits his head really, really hard. And the game designers do a really good job. You see Arthur Morgan when he contracts tuberculosis, for example. And I think you see the moment where there's some trauma, both physically and emotionally, to Dutch. And he starts to just like slowly lose it. And all he talks about is Tahiti and mangoes. And it's just really funny, but really sad. Because it's a long game, probably longer than it needed to be. But they have plenty of time to just see him devolve into this like madman, basically.
It's all fun and games with his like long-winded speeches until you realize they're not metaphors. They're not. There's no analogies. It's just straight up he's bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, he's the one making the decisions. That's probably not good.
Yeah. Yeah, and he just gets increasingly paranoid, distrusting, delusional, and it's really fascinating to watch.
So that's on Dave's behalf. But I don't think it's a bad pick.
No, I like it.
Number 19 is Gontar O'Dim.
So Gontar is cool because he's just the devil in the Witcher 3 game. I don't know how present he is outside of the Heart of Stone DLC. But he makes an impression. So he, very much like the devil, he's creating deals with people that, if you can believe it, go awry, because he's literally the devil. So he's just the cause of one of the most iconic scenes where people are annoying him in a bar, so he stops time and just shoves a fork in a guy's eye. Very brutal. They brought it back in the TV show, though, because it's like everybody remembers that.
So good.
But he's also responsible for one of the greatest boss fights I've ever been a part of, because you, as Geralt, are trying to solve this riddle at the end. You're in this like hell world, and you have to figure out this riddle, and you do, but he keeps throwing obstacles in your way because he's cheating, because he's the fucking devil. And he's just great. You feel this malevolent force that is scary. You don't want to fuck with him, even as Geralt, who is such a badass. And he just really left an impression.
Yeah. I remember you playing the DLC and watching you play it, and you talking about Gontar O'Dim and how like crazy he was in this riddle thing, and then actually like experiencing playing that DLC, and all of it was just so freaking cool, and watching everything that he was capable of and figuring out what the hell to do.
And it's a series that doesn't necessarily do great with the villains, actually. Like the Wild Hunt. I'm not gonna put them on this list because they're just dudes. They're almost serve as a plot device more than anything. So that's why Gontar really stands out, because he is so excellent.
Well, that was a Sean and Maisie vehicle, and so was number 18, Abby.
Yeah. So Abby's tricky because she's also going to show up, I guarantee it, on the character list.
Well, yeah, but she's a character.
She's a great character, but she serves as an antagonist in this game, along with being a deuteragonist. But and she's great. She's a physical force the whole first half of the game. She does, I think, what many fans never recovered from. In killing Joel. And so some people are not going to agree with our choice because they hate her, or maybe they will. Maybe they think she should be higher on the villain list.
Right.
But she's great, and I think she's great because you totally understand, even before you play as her and her perspective, you know why she did it. This guy just doomed the Earth, and everybody's defending Joel. It's like, no, dude.
Well, not only did Joel fucking ruin the Earth, but brutally well.
Yeah.
Not in the first game, you kind of just shoot his foot and then he dies. But like murdered her fucking dad.
Yeah.
Like, how do you come back from that? Like, I don't know. So no.
But beyond just being a force, her presence allows the game to really explore what they're trying to explore, and brings out what they need to in Ellie. And so what she means to the plot cannot be understated, and that's why I think she definitely belonged on the villain list too.
Yeah. I mean, you could almost even say like Ellie is a villain at certain points in the fucking second game.
You could.
Yeah.
We had a couple of picks on this list that didn't make the top 25 that definitely blurred the line. I mean, Abby does, but like Carrie, for example, I thought it was funny. She voted for Cole Phelps as a villain. That's the protagonist of L.A. Noire.
Yeah.
But depending on how you play him and how you look at certain angles, and the fact that he like screams at all the witnesses and stuff, you can be like, actually, I can see the case for it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Number 17 is a vehicle for everybody else who's on the panel except for me. And that's Baldur.
Another God of War.
God, I don't even know where to start. So, probably in large part because Jeffrey Davies, who we know from Lost and from Justified, great actor, gives this guy such a weird swagger. And so the beginning of the game, you're starting in God of War. It's very sad. His wife is dead. Kratos is like crying, and you're like, that's strange. I don't remember him like this. And then out of nowhere, Baldur shows up with his weird little voice, being like, why are you here? He clearly knows more than he should. And then he punches Kratos through the roof. And you're like, fuck. And then he refuses to die. He seems to be completely immortal. He's healing himself. You break his neck. Then he seems fine. And you're like, what is going on? And he just sets the tone for, I think, one of the greatest games in gaming. And he's that anchor that drives your quest with your son forward. He's kind of sympathetic in his own right. He's just really, really well done. And is a huge part of why these games are what they are.
He's also terrifying. Again, as you
so scary.
Open the fucking game, he beats the shit out of Kratos, someone who you are like, he's a fucking god who like gets impaled by a tree. Like, this guy should not be able to get his ass beat this easily.
When we last left Kratos, he killed Zeus.
Yeah.
So
well, and like fucking with Baldur, Kratos literally like smashes him in between two boulders, and Baldur's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
It's great.
I think a large part of why the reboot has been so successful is not just because like Kratos and Atreus and those characters getting more depth, but also the villains. Because again, the original trilogy, Kratos is an asshole and all the gods are assholes. And that's about it. And you can take some satisfaction in hacking and slashing your way through everything, but
totally.
This added depth has gone a long way.
Yeah, and even if you just follow his journey, like, characters can be defined by the changes they make or the changes they don't make. And his mom, Freya, desperately tries to get him to see the light, and he just won't, up to, like, his death. He refuses to change. He's so stubborn because he just lost his ability to feel physically and emotionally. And I just think that is so interesting. Baldur. He's great.
Cool.
He's so good.
Number 16. It's time for Maisie to explain.
He's so high. Woo! He was my number one.
I was like, don't put him number one, but she did.
Carry weight, and as such, 100 points gets you all the way up to number 16 when we had such a split vote on a lot of lower characters here.
Fuck yeah. So this motherfucker is, like, insane. So he's the biggest villain in Resident Evil 7. Oh my god. And like literally 20% of the game, I feel like, I don't know. You're just in this freaking pretty much saw house with all of these traps that are puzzles that literally like fucking hurt you in order to get out, just to get to another room to fucking hurt yourself again and continue. And he's just so crazy. And then also on top of in the main game, there's a DLC where you're playing blackjack with him. And if you like bet wrong, he like chops off your fingers. So you have 5 chances to get it right or else you're fucked. And he's just so freaking cool. And he's my favorite.
So he's not the biggest villain of 7, but he's the most memorable.
Oh, that's true. He's not. The little girl is.
But still, like he takes entire sections of the game. Yeah. The Saw House to me is the most memorable part of the game. And then he shows up in Chris's DLC as the main villain, and then the Blackjack DLC. So all the obstacles he presents to the main character, really, I guess, especially with Maisie, stand out a lot. So she's like,
so cool.
The scariest part of the scariest game I've played is the best villain for her.
And then eventually, even if you manage to make it through the gauntlet, then he just decides to like throw dynamite in the room instead. And you're like, well, that's not fair. I did all the puzzles you wanted finally, you sick fuck.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I mean, to be fair, he has no character development. I don't know what the fuck's wrong with him, but he's just a really cool fucking guy.
Yeah.
Again, though, I don't think every villain needs to have a backstory or needs to be conflicted or redeemable, or sometimes if they're just really good at what they do, that's enough.
Well, it was nice to show like Ethan, like what he brings out of your character is like the ability to not just shoot your way out of stuff.
Right.
Like it's like, oh, he can think through things. And a good villain will expose that. And that's cool.
Well, and it's fun too. he'd also, I think throughout the whole game, he puts like traps. Like he's kind of the setup for like the, you have like boxes and stuff that you can break to get loot. Sometimes those would be filled with dynamite.
Yeah.
So it was just like constantly little traps that this fucker
just
would
like a
set.
persistent force throughout the whole game.
Yeah. I thought it was so cool.
Number 15 is the last one before we take a bit of a jump. However, it stops the string of like we had like a few different one vote characters down here with some other ones. This one had 3, and it was my last cut, and it's Hades from Hades.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I almost wonder if he's so low just because, like, by the end of the game, he is kind of just he's not even a bad guy anymore, but he is your main obstacle for, in a way, the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And the development he gets on the other side of Lucas Baker.
Yeah, exactly.
Is fascinating. You learn more about him. You learn maybe he's not as cut and dry as you first thought. He definitely has his flaws, but he's also like, sometimes he's just a dad who's trying his best.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
You feel bad for him. And I think he's great.
He's so good. I love his design. I love the voice acting. I love how he and Zagreus play off of each other. It's just so good. And yeah, by the end, he's not really a villain anymore, but he's just so iconic in those early runs when you're trying to beat him and you like maybe still don't quite have all of your abilities and skills yet, so he's just a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great.
Well, and it's also really cute too, like on top of him, like there's so much more meaning to him trying to keep Zagreus at home, like it's not just because he's like a mean dad who wants his son to be locked up. Like there's so much more, something so much deeper that you like eventually get to, but like learning that it's like, oh my God, I care. He's so nice.
and like not to go too deep, but like the metaphor of like overprotective parent.
Yeah.
I think it touches on that, and the conflict of like anger versus like, well, they just love you.
Mm-hmm.
It's embodied really well here.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about putting the Disney one here as a joke for the picture, and I was like, no, we got to take it seriously. Hades is cool. We all like that game. It's why it did so well in our best games ever revamp. But I thought about it. After Hades, we kind of take off. We strap onto a rocket ship.
Great.
Everything at this point has at
Heck
least 3 votes or more. Most of them are like 5 or more. There's a point jump. And it doesn't really stop plateauing again until like the top 3, where there was a bunch of separation and a lot of points involved. So, number 14 is Albert Wesker.
So I'm
Nice.
going to admit this is probably not a good confession, but his presence in 5 is actually what propels him for me. Which is maybe when he's at his fucking campiest.
Yeah.
But like, I think about some of the best cutscenes I've ever seen in a game, and when he's fucking teleporting around fighting Chris and Jill in that mansion, it's so fucking cool. And he's like, and 5 minutes is all I can spare for you. And Chris being like, I'm sick of your bullshit.
Uh-huh.
It's just so good. And he and catching a rocket. It's such stupid shit, but you're like, oh, it's fucking awesome. And yeah, in the first one, he's a traitor, and he sets into motion most of the big time bad events in the game. So that's cool. But just his presence in 5, I love.
A lot of what he's done for me, and why I think I actually had him 1 spot higher than you did, is not only Resident Evil 5, which is all correct, but also Marvel vs. Capcom, where he's one of the coolest characters. He didn't hold up well after the original version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but again, just the ability to like teleport and move around quickly. His line delivery, like the voice acting, is always really good. Like he's meant to be kind of a try-hard cool guy, but he pulls it off, so I'm gonna go along with it.
Yeah. And they played him more straight in the remake. I'm like, most of the choices you made, I'm happy for. This is actually not one of them. I don't think he's as effective if he's
That's
just
true.
a straight like regular bad guy.
Yeah.
You got to kind of make him over the top.
With the abilities that he's got and his outlook on life, he kind of has to be a little silly.
Yeah.
While still being menacing. But
Yep.
Number 13 is where we finally found the home for the guy I mentioned earlier, which is Bowser. He was number 19, but Dave had him high up on his list, so he rocketed all the way up to 13th. Our first time we've seen anywhere near this many votes. That's 6. We haven't seen more than 3 on anything yet, I don't believe. So we got a lot of little votes along the way because I think everybody wanted to recognize what Sean mentioned already, which was like, is he the best villain? No. But his status, his longevity matters.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is in the push-pull of character versus icon. This is all icon.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost have come to hate him because it's like, you're not even like a threat anymore. But he almost gets more interesting now being how many times he showed up as an ally to Mario rather than like the villain. You know, when they play him up like in this screenshot, and there's occasionally they do kind of play him as the bad guy. Mario 64, for the most part, he's pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's more effective than like this Joker who like does the Peaches song in the Mario, even though it's very funny. But yeah, I mean, 13, that's fine.
Yeah.
Probably no higher, right? I think it's fine where he ended up. Again, he was lower before when I added Dave's into the mix here. It rocketed him up to here. I don't think he deserves to be top 10. I'm sure some people would have him up there. Dave did. But
yeah, I mean, and being like Koopa actually in the first game, and I'm assuming, like, I guess you could make a case maybe those are different characters, but I don't. It's the same. It's the same guy. That was very scary back in the regular game. Just shooting fire, the sinister music. How many times? Because I sucked at that game, he killed me. But yeah, as time has gone on, he's just kind of become a joke. But everybody knows his name. I think even my dad. My dad knows Mario, Luigi, Bowser, and Pokemon as characters. I double checked with them this weekend. So I think that deserves some recognition.
that is something.
He's proud of it.
Yeah, character. His favorite character, Pokemon.
Pokemon.
Not even Pikachu.
Yeah,
which is a layup, I think, but just goes to show you, even Pokemon still has a ways to go.
Yep.
Number 12 is one that I wasn't sure where he was going to go on this list and may also make an appearance in the character list. It's N, speaking of Pokemon.
So
Hey.
I should let Michaela talk first on N.
Okay. He is my favorite villain in the entire Pokemon series. I ranked him very high on my villain list. He just symbolizes everything that's like a good Pokemon game should be. Everything that Black and White was, he embodies it. He's an interesting rival. He has a goal that's actually compelling and meaningful, and it leads to some very interesting questions. He's not just trying to destroy the world. He's actually trying to do something like helpful from his perspective. Like, you totally get it. And he's also just, and the music for him is a brilliant. Each time you fight him, he has a presence in the plot. The fact that you get to do a Ferris wheel ride with him and you get to learn more about his motivation. So he's not just the rival that you show up and fight. You kind of actually have a rapport a little bit. Like, it's, he's so good. I love him.
Yeah, and like wanting to free all Pokemon, you're like, huh, yeah, I can see where he's coming from actually when you really break it down, and having some depth to a Pokemon villain other than like, we want to destroy time and space, right? But why? why do you want to destroy all of it?
We're gonna flood the world. Why? Because we love water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had Blue/Gary on my original cut. And Michaela mentioned N, and I was like, God, when I break it down, there's no way I can't have N, because Blue in my mind is fleshed out like from the show. But in the game, he has like, 5 lines of dialogue. He shows up repeatedly.
And 3 of them are smell you later.
Oh,
Exactly.
no.
Exactly. So, yeah, when I compare it to N, who like does everything I liked about Gary, he embodies and more. I was like, I gotta vote for him.
It's also interesting because for all the reasons you mentioned, but the one thing I can add is like you finally end up going to like his castle, as it were, and all you see is like, oh, this is like a repressed child in a grown-up body, which makes people wanting to fuck him a little interesting. But that's not a thing. We're not going to talk about that right now. And they love shipping him with Big City Trucker as the main female character that you can be.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, it's like you can see his background. There's a lot of environmental storytelling there that didn't really need to be in a Pokemon game. So between that and the fact that he's just like, oh, let's see, we have to have a fight. So you, and you are on my team now.
Yeah.
You never really know what you're going to run into with him because everybody else has like a staple, right? Oh, this is their starter Pokemon you have to deal with. And then just like, I'm just going to pick things from around the forest nearby. Cool.
Yep.
So very different, but in almost all good ways and in a height that the series has never really managed to capture again since.
And then just because you team up with them at the end, like that, I think rather than being a detriment, that's like the cherry on top. Like, I think that that's great. And that's his journey complete. And it's great.
So good.
We're one spot out of the top 10. And this character was originally in the top 10. This is another thing that Dave sort of shuffled around a bit. One voter can't have that much sway, but had some differences. This is, I think, an interesting one. This was Carrie's number 1. It's our first number 1 that we're seeing on the list. But I think you can make a case for it. It's Joker from Batman Arkham.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? Because it's the first case of a character who did not originate in gaming. But I think his presence in the Arkham games is so unique and so defined that it makes total sense. And I have no argument. He really makes those games, all 3 of them. And the relationship between him and Batman is just fascinating, and it drives everything forward. And it's some of the most interesting Joker stories I've seen, actually, in any medium. So I like it.
It's interesting because this is obviously another Mark Hamill masterclass, and we have him in the animated series, which is also very good. But I think there's a certain extra level of like darkness and malice he can bring here in this trilogy that he doesn't really get to tap into a ton in the animated series. And there's been a couple of movies like Mask of Phantasm or whatever where they've delved into that too. But Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill made Batman and Joker for me, and to see it extend to a video game where that was now playable and you could experience it was a highlight. So I didn't really have a way to find room for Joker on my list, but I don't have any issue with him being here.
Yeah, and I think he gets overshadowed in Arkham Knight because too much Batmobile. But it maybe is my favorite of his performances and presence as a character, because he's not even alive anymore, but he has such an influence on the plot, and he gets his coolest shit. There's like a what if scenario where you play as him and you kill all the other villains. It's just really interesting, and like they really explore fully how he affects Batman's psyche and how he exists there. Yeah. And it's really, really well done. And like you said, masterclass by Mark Hamill really sells all of it. It's great.
Yeah, I remember I think you were telling me about that in Arkham Knight, if that's right. Yeah. And that's such a cool idea, because that's true. Like, Joker generally has played like such a large role in Batman's life, and like the fact that he like literally haunts him in his psyche is so freaking cool. And I know limited information, but like I freaking love the art style of these games. Like that image there, and like the images that I've seen in like music videos of songs that I like from these games are so freaking cool and so like dark and just like cringy kind of.
And I'll just say too, like he's responsible for some of Batman's most interesting character development that I've ever seen, and it's in these games. Like the ability to overcome him is great, and some of the biggest jump scares in gaming, because in this game he shows up when you grapple, which you do 1,000,000 times. But as you're coming up, they program, sometimes randomly, Joker will catch you when you go up to the ledge, and you just scares the shit out of you, and it's great. Yeah,
that sounds so cool.
Yeah, between those and some of the Scarecrow stuff, they did a really good job of like conveying that fear through a game.
Yep, absolutely.
They do that in The Last of Us. It makes me, or not Last of Us. I'm sorry.
Well, they do too in The Last of Us, but yeah, it's great.
Into the top 10 we go, and we start with Handsome Jack.
Go ahead, Kayla. You played this most recently.
I did. I didn't know anything going into Borderlands 2. I was playing with some friends online, and Handsome Jack is he's great. His presence throughout the entire game, start to finish. He is just constantly a thorn in your side. But he also kind of has the menace to back it up, but he's also very funny, and a lot of his dialogue, I think, was ad-libbed.
Wouldn't
if I'd have
surprise
to.
me.
That's so cool.
Yeah, he just like goes off the cuff saying like random shit. His voice actor does. So
Cool.
he's a delight just hearing the random stuff that he will say, and then towards the end there he just gets increasingly more like desperate, and then you have a really great reason to hate him. He has a great reason to hate you. So there's a really good rivalry there. And the final boss fight with him is pretty fun. Like it kind of makes the second game for me. So
Yeah.
much of my experience playing it is just like him calling in and just being a menace. It's
He
a delight.
makes the second game, period, I think. Chris,
Yeah.
who's the villain of Borderlands 1?
Couldn't tell you.
Exactly. Nobody knows. And in the third one, it's the twins, which I only remember because they try to be Handsome Jack and they fail. And honestly, Handsome Jack ruined Borderlands, I think, because they keep trying to attain those same heights and they just can't anymore. Like the writing, it all kind of feels flat or unfunny at this point. He just nails so much and he elevates everything and he starts the game where he's already almost like a legendary figure. And you're kind of learning like why throughout the game. And then he starts calling you constantly. He's really funny. He's a psychopath. And then like you can kind of, it reminds me of the Penguin show that we just watched where you can kind of see where he's coming from and you almost want to relate to him. And then he'll make a decision where you're like, nope, yeah, you're just a bad guy. You're just crazy. You're just selfish. Even when you say it's about something else, it's really only about you. And it's just, it's great. Like you said, he drives the entire plot along. And it's awesome. And they've never found it again.
Number 9 only made it into the top 10 because of a Dave vote. Was just outside of it before.
Damn it. I'm going to hate this.
You might. It's Magus from Chrono Trigger.
Oh, I don't hate this. Wow, so Magus was on my list at one point. He was on Maze's list for one point, I know. So wait, so Dave's the one who voted? You didn't vote Magus?
Oh, I did, but he was outside the top 10. Now he's in.
No, like because Dave voted for him. It moved
I see.
He was either 11th.
Oh, 5
voted
votes.
for
Plenty of people voted for him.
Yeah, he was either 11th or 12th. I don't remember which, and he ended up now being pushed into 9th because Dave had him decently high, like middle of the list.
I mean, Magus is one of the first villains that did what he did, which is like he's an antagonist, but if you do things, if you make the right decisions, he like joins you at the end. I can't think of many games that did this before Chrono Trigger did.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is like he's a foil for the first half of the game. You see him, there's random statues devoted to him. He's got like cultist followers. You're not really sure what's going on with him for the majority of it. And then you work your way up the castle and you fight him and he seems bad and he's the one who summoned Lavos, so it's all. And eventually you get to the stuff with Zeal, and that's where we start to go to a whole other level, which is why he's up here. Because now we're looking at this like tragic backstory and him using his own tragic backstory to make himself out to be a prophet and try and enact revenge is something we haven't really seen done even since then, but certainly not at that time where it's like, oh yeah, I know what's going to happen. Follow my advice. Oh, by the way, that's me. That's me from 20 years ago. I'm from the future.
Yeah. Yep. It's very cool. And just, again, the fact that he will then join you is, I think, just really, really awesome. And there's so much that's done creatively in this plot, not just with him, but just across the board that was ahead of its time. And I think that means something. So it's why he showed up on everybody's list.
I'm kind of happy with the spot. I don't think he deserves to be top 5, but I think making the top 10 is appropriate. Unsurprisingly, this panel has always liked Chrono Trigger. It was number 3 on our revamped Best Games Ever list, but still, a good showing for him. Number 8 also got boosted by Dave.
God damn.
A couple of these are true. Dave has voted for every character that's left.
Okay.
So has Sean. So have I.
Okay, all right.
So Sean won't be disappointed by any of these picks. If he is, he's fucking stupid because he voted for him.
It's your fault.
I guess the
He
order can
said
be quibbled with, but yeah.
Boosted, not solely
Because he'd be like, well, I only had him like 20th. How is he 5th?
Yeah.
Number 8 is Goro Akechi.
Fuck yeah. The person I would have dated if Ren was gay. Allowed to be gay.
Oh, yeah, right.
So rude.
Man.
Actually, that is correct. That's the correct answer.
Which definitely in Royal was something you could justify. I don't know. People wanted it to happen in the first game, and there were little like branches you could try and tug on there. But in Royal, especially because of the social link they added, all of a sudden it goes to a new level.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, God, where do I even start? in a game. So it's one of my favorite games ever, and you have various villains, right? All the people that you're doing the heist with, the god at the end, and to me, he's the one that really stands out. He, because he's so personable and so smart and charming, but such a psychopath and such a little bitch. And I think, in Royal, you have the whole second part where you team up with him, which I love. And that's my favorite part of that game. But he tries to just shoot you in the face and it doesn't work. But when he shoots you in the face, he's thinking it's going to work.
Yeah.
And he's just a homicidal maniac. And just such a sociopath, but he plays it so well and it's so compelling. And you can see there's an interesting, maybe not a good person, but someone you want to sympathize below those layers. And it's just been kind of used and abused to get to the point where he is now. But he's so bad. I love it. I love my little Akechi.
I wasn't sure what to do with Persona 5 because you can make an argument for Kamoshida. Now, he's a little bit one note, but he's a very, very good one note as far as establishing everything that game's going to do. You can also make the case for Shido. And a large part of that is what he does to his own son, Akechi, and the fact that, even after he's basically sacrificed himself for the party in the main game before the royal stuff, Shido's like, yeah, I knew he was going to betray me. I knew who he was. I didn't care. And you're like, God damn, no wonder he ended up the way he did.
Yeah.
So, he's bad because Shido was so bad, but Akechi has so many more layers that I think he's a much better fit for the list. Shido didn't get any votes. I thought maybe he'd get one or two small ones, but I think this is a fine outcome still.
Well, and let me just say, I think Royal really drove home how high he got on my list because I love the fact that he doesn't necessarily turn good. He's just, his conviction is so strong at the end and living in this perfect world. He's like, fuck that. I don't want that at all. And if it means I die, then fucking great. I don't give a shit. And that's cool.
Yeah.
So that little extra element really pushed him over the edge for me.
Yeah.
And then the ending did something I didn't really care for, which was maybe he's alive. Well, yeah. And I don't know why or how he would be, first of all. But also, I think his story is better when he's not.
Yeah.
So they were just teasing it. It probably didn't mean anything, but still, even the suggestion of well, I don't know. I don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Number 7, I was a little surprised to see this high, but then again, Sean and I are largely responsible for it, so maybe I shouldn't be. It's Andrew Ryan from BioShock.
Yeah, so along the lines of the best character in BioShock is the environment. That's why Andrew Ryan, he's not Frank Fontaine, who kind of sucks. I kind of actually don't love that much. But Andrew Ryan, it's this brainchild very much in the Atlas Shrugged and Randian world of I'm going to create this utopia and I'm so smart that I don't see how it's clearly not going to work. But you can kind of see why. Again, not to get too political, but in a world where Trump is elected president, you can see there's a foundation for the thinking of we should be able to do science without worrying about morality or advance medicine and not care about who it's hurting because the ultimate result is all that matters. And obviously the iconic lines, a man chooses, a slave obeys, would you kindly? Some of gaming's biggest moments he's responsible for. And I think that means something.
Yeah.
The only thing I was torn about, and I mean, look, I had him in my top 10, so I'm not that torn, was what you mentioned. Because is he the villain of this game? Is Frank Fontaine the villain of this game?
Frank Fontaine is the villain, but he sucks.
Right. So that's why it's tough because it's Frank Fontaine does a lot of evil shit in this game, whereas Ryan's just sort of whimsical. He's done a lot of bad things, to be clear, but he's sort of just well, this is all going to hell. I don't know what's going on. In fact, you know what? Just go ahead and bludgeon me to death because this is going so far afield of what I wanted. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So these are villains, and he definitely is one. He's not the biggest one in this game, but he's definitely the best, which is why I had him in the top 10, even though I was well, Fontaine's the main villain here, but again, who cares about him?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Maisie, anything from Andrew Ryan when you played BioShock?
I just this. I mean, this one was one of my first horror video games, and like just everything that ended with him was just fucking mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so he's, to me, he's just more like iconic in that sense of, like you said, like just freaking amazing.
Yeah, and you know, like one of the biggest twists in gaming, you get to really know him through the audio logs that you see,
Yeah.
and just how like sort of twisted he is, and how he pretends to be above all the sedition and everything, but like he's really not. He's actually very petty. There's just so many layers to him, and his downfall reflected in the downfall of all of Rapture. It's just so incredible every time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder if we'll ever go back to the BioShock universe. I mean, after Infinite, I don't know where you would go from there. There's ways you could.
Yeah.
But when I think back to the first 2 games in particular, I'm like, man, it feels like an IP that should not have just disappeared from the face of the earth. But
Yep.
I agree.
Yep.
EA and BioWare and other companies are not what they were 15 years ago, so their ability to tell the same stories they did at that time, I don't know if I trust it.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 6 is the biggest change on this list from Dave's standpoint because
God
it's his
damn it.
number 1.
God damn it.
This
gonna
character
say that,
was
I don't
not
even
in
know.
the top 10, but a number 1 vote has a lot of power. So even in these votes that, as you can see, are starting to accrue a lot of points, that wasn't enough to really move the needle. And we're going back to Persona 5 with Dr. Maruki.
Cool. Okay. He was high on my list, so I can't complain. All right,
He-
Dave. I
You
apologize.
take back your goddamn it.
I know. That's why I was letting you do it, because I was like, well, he might end up rescinding that. But, I mean, look, he was like 15th or 14th, I think, before this. So he was definitely like, a pretty good presence on the list. And you can certainly make the case. Now, I had him a little bit lower on my list just because it's a double-edged sword. I think you can argue that this perfect world that he's trying to create by messing with people's cognition and like offering them this best version of themselves, there's such a good job of writing done so that you think about like, oh, this is a reasonable thing, that it's hard to see him as a straight-up villain. And the game is doing that intentionally. I think he
Yep.
belongs in a villain list. Again, I voted for him. But I do think that hurt him in my eyes a little bit because I'm like, well, if you can agree with him so steadfastly, how much of a villain is he really?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to like when I really tried to define it, it came down to a character standing in the way of like the main party's goals, and like we end up running counter. Oh, I guess you don't have to. There's a version where you agree with him, and then
Yeah.
the game just ends. But for me, and I was really wrestling with this pick because I was aware it's a little bit of recency bias, and I really tried to like reflect, but I just kept coming back to, for that same reason, his goals, more than maybe any other villain on this list, you can like see where he's coming from. You really can. And he's never like, well, I'm going to give everybody what they want and so I can be in power. It's like, I truly believe in his mind, he's trying to be selfless. Like, he's actually really trying to do the right thing.
Yep.
He's just a little bit misguided. Because, you can't do that. It doesn't work. And when you really try to break it down, it actually doesn't work like he thinks it's going to work. There are some flaws holes you can poke in it. But that just makes it all the more endearing. He really cares. He has great music too. And like the whole game he's arguably the final boss, right? Of both chronologically, but also like it all sort of is building towards him and Royal.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just so good. And the voice acting,
Yeah.
excellent.
Well, and I think the thing that benefits is Persona 3 and Persona 4 and original vanilla Persona 5. Persona loves to go for like the big concept final boss, like, oh, you're fighting against the corrupted will of humanity,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, like metaphorically this is cool, but I don't know as far as an actual boss fight how much I'm like, oh boy, here I go fighting Chalice. Like I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how well that works in practice. Whereas this, you're like, okay, like we have an ideological battle, we've come to loggerheads on it, we're gonna have to sort this out one way or the other. And I think, look, he's a super compelling character. And again, I voted for him, although I was like 18th or 19th because of my issues with it. I don't really mind him being up here just because he represents what makes Persona 5 go from a really good game to one of the best ever in the editions that Royal had.
Yep. Yeah, and when you take a villain who, just to throw this out, like he is giving your team therapy. Like you're a therapist, so he's your counselor. He knows all of your fears and anxieties,
Mm-hmm.
and then he kind of doesn't mean to, but he throws that all at you at the end.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all a byproduct of his own grief and just kind of
Yep.
accidentally getting his own access to a persona that, in the sense, essentially, like him being next to Andrew Ryan makes sense. They both tried to make a utopia. Just Ryan's was more literal,
Yeah.
And-
Yeah.
and this is more, dreamscape. But
Yep.
same idea.
Yeah.
All right, top 5.
I'm
And-
so sorry. Can I just throw out in the ending where you side with him and you get the reveal of like what his world is? He's not like a king. He's just like a dude.
Uh-huh.
So he really, he truly was fine. Like in this version where he's not going to take all the power. It's just, it's amazing.
Because again, he's like you say, he's not micromanaging anything.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, here's this thing. You should be happy now.
Yep.
Then we start
Goodbye.
to question
Right.
it. He gets a little peeved, but
Yep.
we start the top 5 with the only unanimous pick,
Wow.
which sounds weird, but
Interesting. Yeah.
it also has less than half the points of our number 1. So even though it was unanimous, it was also way down on multiple of those lists because I think this is a polarizing figure. To me, I think that the remakes have done him a lot of good. That is Sephiroth, who I
was about
don't
to-
think would be in the top 5 if this was 10 years ago.
So I'm gonna be honest. So the remakes helped a little bit. He's only on my list because super iconic. Like
Mhm.
everybody fucking knows Sephiroth. He's synonymous with Final Fantasy. He has his own encore at the concerts. Like, yeah, he's the face of RPGs to a lot of people. So I had to put him on the list. You can quibble. Are you even really fighting him? Yeah, kind of not because it's Genova, but he also is sort of like influencing Genova. So
Right.
it's weird, but in the remakes,
Like,
it's definitely more like
is it-
him. He's more of a presence. Yeah, top 5. That's probably fine. But I think to your point, 8 people voted. He only made 5th, and it's because I think a lot of people had him, but maybe not super high on the list.
Nope.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
We had to
I
pay him homage.
I actually think I had him the highest
Yes.
of anybody. If for no other reason than it's what you said. I mean, he might be the villain of video games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could say Bowser, Robotnik. You could say a couple other folks that are still to come. Like, there's some other cases you can make for sure. But I think just because of his design, the fire stuff, which I took the picture of, the long-ass sword, like, there's several things that reach out in a way that, like, your dad's not going to know who he is. But a lot of regular people who don't follow games might. Or they at least might be like, oh, that guy. They might not know his name or what he does, but they'd be like, oh, yeah, I've seen him around. So he's kind of become ubiquitous. The remakes have come a long way in helping that. Because, again, original Final Fantasy VII Sephiroth, top 20, probably. I think he makes the list, for sure, but doesn't quite make it to these heights.
Well, in the remakes, he comes back and is like, by the way, I'm not dead, and now I'm traveling dimensions, it seems like, and I'm actually going to get my happy ending after all. I failed there before, but now I have all the knowledge. I'm the alpha Sephiroth, and it's pretty interesting. So he has more agency, I think, now. And he's also a lot scarier, I think, because of it.
Yeah.
So was this number 5? Was that Sephiroth or Alpha Sephiroth?
That's a good question. I think just in
kidding.
general,
I'm just being
whichever
stupid.
version you want the most.
Right, because we're going to have somebody else in the top 5 who has a conflict with that, so you're just going to have to pick
I'll
whichever
pick Beta
version,
Sephiroth.
Okay.
whatever version you think is best.
Beta Sephiroth. Haven't heard that before.
Yeah, the one from Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Our number 4 moved into the top 5 because of Dave, because it was
God damn
close.
it.
It's also Sean's number 2, so he's going to have to take that
Oh.
goddamn it back as well. The Elusive Man from Mass Effect has the fewest number of votes of anything in the top 5, and it's not especially close, but it has some very high votes. I think that's just because a couple of our panelists have not played these games. I'm not saying that they're wrong for not
Yeah.
having them, just that they don't have... That's the same reason I didn't vote for Handsome Jack. I think Handsome Jack's a very good villain. I haven't played Borderlands 2, so I didn't care. But for the Elusive Man, I mean, look, this is my number 4, Sean's number 2, so that carried a lot of weight. And in general, I mean... I put this image, and I try to get up-close pictures of, like all the villains, so you could see them in that little thumbnail in the top right corner if you're watching the stream. This one I had to go with this shot because, I mean, what else represents Mass Effect more than this?
Yeah. Yeah, so, God. What a cool guy. And by that, I mean he's a real piece of shit.
Wikipedia does say he has a casual swagger, so yeah, he
Oh.
seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, no, he is a cool guy. So, if this has not become clear yet, I think it's clear now that I love villains who you can relate to where they're coming from. Not necessarily that they're sympathetic, but just like you understand what their drive is. And for the Elusive Man, the whole time, he's just until maybe the very end, but for all of 2, which is the main one that you really are working with him a lot in, he's just like looking out for humanity. And maybe he's not always doing it the right way, but like he cares and he's doing what he can, and he has some legitimate points. And he is, as his name would indicate, he's very mysterious. He seems to have more money than God. He brought you back from the dead, which is interesting, through technology.
Really?
And yeah, he just kind of sets everything into motion. He is your seemingly ally for most of the game, regardless of you're playing Paragon or Renegade. He's just interesting. And Martin Sheen voicing him was quite the pull, and it really helps. He's not just phoning in the performance; it's really good.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is I remember reading a little anecdote about him. Like he always had like a pen. He didn't want to smoke, so to represent this constant, like never-ending chain of cigarettes that the Elusive Man always has, he would always have a pen in his mouth, so he could like take it out and like have it affect his speech. Like
Yeah,
he had no reason. I don't know what they paid him. I'm sure they had to do a decent amount of money to get Martin Sheen to sign on. But he had no reason to go this hard on it, and it's a large part of why the character works so well.
Yep, and he's a big part. He doesn't just show up like a couple times. You're like checking in with him every time you come back from a mission. He is bankrolling you. He's sending you out he has your goals mapped out. He seems like an ally against this greater threat. It's just he's really compelling.
He also has white glowing eyes.
Oh yeah, because technology. Because technology.
Mm-hmm.
Super casual.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
kidding.
And I like that you never really interact with him in any setting except this massive like office with just this view of this beautiful backdrop. Like you don't just wander into him like walking around the Citadel. You don't like it's always in this environment where it's all very controlled, very technologically based. And yeah, he does some really evil stuff too. So it just all adds up to a good package.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best villain of one of the greatest trilogies of all time, like that means something too.
Mm-hmm.
The top 3 had separation. Up to this point, we've kind of just been going upward at a pretty consistent rate. The next one doesn't jump up a ton, although all 7 of the main panelists did vote for them. So did number 2. But number 3 is the one I was talking about as far as which version do you go with, because there's like 15.
Truly.
And that's Ganondorf.
Yep. I think what put him as high as he made it on my list, because I think he was going to make it no matter what, was the Wind Waker version, because that's the one where he actually has some character development and kind of like a story. A little bit in Ocarina of Time, I think, being like he's this leader of this female-only civilization, one male born every 100 years to rule them all. And he like shows up as an advisor to the king just to betray him. That's interesting. But Wind Waker, you're like, damn, there's some depth actually here.
So good. That's the reason that he also ranked as high as, I mean, not like super, super high, but just because of Wind Waker. It gave him such depth and like sympathetic depth in a way that I would argue other games have not done before since then.
Yeah, I mean, so often he's just the big pig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or some big musclehead.
Yeah.
In the most recent ones, which I know some people liked, and they like Matthew Mercer as him, and I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, it's interesting because when you look back on it, Wind Waker's a large part of the reason why I have him so high. He's not in Wind Waker very much. But the scenes that he has are all very good and impactful. Like, you talk with him on top of a tower, and then he chucks you across the ocean with a bird, and, like, you obviously have the final showdown, and that stuff's great. Like, there's moments for sure. But when you add total runtime, you see him for, like, 10% of the game tops.
Oh,
but
yeah.
he makes a lasting impact there, and he usually does anytime he shows up. I don't think there's very many times where I'm like, oh, here's Ganon again, because like he kind of has to be there. If you're going to have him be the wielder of the Triforce of Power every time, I would almost rather you just commit to it than do the Zant thing where it's like, it's not. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, to answer your question of which version, I think I really did vote like all the versions because of the, the demise curse where the wielder is always going to show up throughout generations. And I got to give credit because unlike Bowser, Ganondorf, there's a timeline where he won There's a timeline where like he literally killed Link, and then there's others where like he kind of won and dictated what happened for the next, right before Wind Waker. So like he has a share of really kind of fucking things up, and so I want to give credit to that too.
And then we're not going to talk about Muscle Bound 1 anymore.
I don't give a shit. Yeah, I was like, kind of be done with this game.
Zaddy. No. No. All right, 2 left. You can probably guess the 2 that they are. All of you voted for him.
Actually, I don't know.
I don't remember.
Samuel Beechworth?
Yeah, I love Beechworth. He's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
He did
He's
get
number
votes, but no. It's down to 2, and we haven't talked about anybody else's number 1 yet. We only hit Carrie's and Dave's. All 4 of us
And
on
mine.
the screen.
Oh, yeah, I know one of them.
We have not hit a number 1 yet.
There's no way the number 1 is not going to be who I know, so now I don't know who the number 2 is. But
The number 2 has 100 more points than Ganondorf, even all the way up here in the top 3. It's
Yeah.
GLaDOS.
good.
Duh.
Now, to be clear, this is no one's number 1.
Yeah. But I bet you a bunch of like between like 3 and 10.
There's a 3rd, a 4th,
Yeah.
a 6th, a 6th, a 3rd, a 2nd.
So GLaDOS is amazing and very funny, but also very sinister. So the writing, I think, propels GLaDOS a whole bunch, right?
yeah.
I think Portal 2 is really where I was like, she needs to have a place like high up on my list. Because you really actually get some like sort of character. She's a computer, but you get some character development, and she's like the bad guy, but also you like kind of team up, and there's some interesting depth there that you were not expecting. And some of the, I mean, not just good writing, it's some of the best villain writing / some of the best game writing I've ever seen, and she's a large part of that. She sings a song. It's just it's
2 of them.
great. Yeah. So
Her songs are so good.
I love it. And she like made Portal.
Yeah. She's the reason
Yeah.
why I got God, I'm so bad at puzzles. Everyone needs to know I suck at fucking puzzles. And obviously Portal is all fucking puzzles. She's the only reason why I was like, get through the puzzle so you can hear more of GLaDOS.
Maisie was just like, what about the cake?
Where's the cake?
Is it a lie? Is it real? I don't know.
I want the cake. I love cake.
I know Portal has the Valve machine behind it, so it's maybe a little disingenuous to say this, but like without GLaDOS, Portal is a charming indie game.
Yeah.
Because with the strength of its physics-based stuff, with the portals, it's a fun game to play, and it's a lot of fun to experiment with it and see how you get momentum and all that stuff. There's a good basis there without GLaDOS specifically. But, I mean, Sean already said it. She made the game.
Yeah.
There's a reason why this became a cultural phenomenon, and yes, it's also the cake. But, like, Chell is just a self-insert. And I know a couple people have voted for her on their character list, and I'm a little confused by that because other than environmental clues, there's almost nothing there. But that's a rant for later. The point is, she's there just to be like a straight man foil to GLaDOS' abuse the whole time, and that keeps you as the player motivated to keep going forward, and it's also funny, and she sings. I mean, I was a little surprised that she ended up this high, but not really when you look at it, and again, with this many high votes, it's not surprising that it happened.
Well, and I think the rollout of GLaDOS is really great because like it starts where you're like, oh, it's interesting. There's this voice guiding me along. And then she starts to say things that are making you question. I don't know if she's not outright like hilarious a lot of the time, but you're second guessing things. And then she tries to kill you and you're like, wait a minute. And just like everything they do for this journey and then how she's incorporated into 2 as well is just like writing 101. It's exactly what you need to do for a compelling sort of mysterious villain. And yeah, it made the game.
In a weird way, it reminds me of the Lonely Island song Space Olympics, just because it's like, okay, things seem good. This is fun. We're having a good time. A couple red flags. That's probably fine. Push through. Oh, shit, everything's gone south.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
quickly.
Yep.
And that leaves our number 1. It is all 4 of our number 1s. So I mean, none of us can be surprised by the outcome. Number 1s are huge. So this was 100 points ahead of Ganondorf. Kefka is another 100 points ahead of GLaDOS, which is a result we have never seen in a voting thing like this, and we've done like double digit of them now. But yeah, as good as Joker was, there's a different Clown Prince that we have as our number 1 of all time.
So there's the obvious stuff of like, and we've said it before, he destroys the world. Like that's a villain where they succeed. And but I read this analysis that was really interesting, like the Ludo narrative presence he has, where he just stands counter to everything that the game's theme is about, which is like togetherness, all these there's no lead in the game, so it's really the power of unity. I'm not gonna say friendship because that means something else, but like how important coming together is, and he just is counter to that completely. And it's a really interesting like meta narrative technique, and that's what you want out of a foil. And then you have all the stuff where he's a cackling clown, really well designed, really scary, really maniacal, complete sociopath. Has the shocking ending where, like, I don't know if you guys felt this way. Playing through Final Fantasy VI, I didn't know that he was like the main villain. I thought he was going to be almost sort of like a Gilgamesh, where he's going to repeatedly sort of come up, kind of have his antics, but then you're, kind of a side character. But then he poisons the whole town. And you're like, that's kind of dark for a side character. But then the big twist is when he kills the Emperor right at the halfway sort of point of the game, or at least the end of Act 1, and takes all the power for himself. And you're like, well, fuck, that was not good. I would rather have the Emperor with all this power than this crazy person. And that moment is so well done. And I think that's what really stood out to me, is like a side character becoming the main villain.
Well, and 6 was, I think, like literally the second legit video game I ever played after Chrono Trigger. And, in watching just the development of like this guy, this random crazy dude, and just like the actual like what the game developers like let him do, right? Where like when he poisoned the town, when he killed the Emperor, when he did all of that stuff, I was like, is this like allowed? Like, how are we supposed to come back from this shit? And so it was just like so amazing to like watch that whole story. And yeah, him being the villain is amazing. No.
And there's a comparison. So I finished Attack on Titan recently, which is the story about kind of a normal guy getting too much power. Is like, if you sum it up, and it just reminded me of Kefka. Like, what happens when a crazy person becomes like has godlike power? If you want to relate it to the real world or even just in fantasy, what happens then? Yeah. And Final Fantasy VI answers that, and the answer is not great.
No,
pretty bad.
Monster Train, in fact. Yeah.
Okay, any thoughts on your number one?
I mean, just that he's absolutely brilliant and iconic, and the fact that he wins when so few villains are kind of quote unquote allowed to do that, and the fact that you kind of have to, you get a second chance to beat him, but only after he's destroyed everything. It's really cool, and just like what a ballsy choice for a game 30 something years ago to be like, you know what, actually he is gonna win, and you're all fucked.
Absolutely.
Try again.
What I like
is cool. It's just really cool.
It's akin to what we mentioned a little bit ago, where it's like he does a lot with very little time.
Yeah.
Because the first time you see him, it's outside of Figaro Castle in the desert, and it's kind of a throwaway. Yeah, he tries to burn the castle, they submerge, and it puts out the flames, and he gets sand in his boots, and he's mad. You're like, oh, and you're right. Like, that sounds like that's like Gilgamesh coded. He's going to be comic relief.
Yeah.
And then every other time you see him, he is absolutely not comic relief. And you're like, oh, but he looks like a clown. So he's supposed to be funny. And he says things like, there's a reason why oppose rhymes with dispose, because like these people were useless to me. Or like Sella stabs him up on the floating mountain when he's trying to kill Gestalt, and he says he hates her like 22 times. And you're like, oh. So even in these little moments, there's these things that are just like, oh, this guy's actually just a Looney Tune. And as Sean said, now he's a god. So best of luck. And you can even make the case like, okay, you scratch and claw in the world of ruin. You reunite everybody that was scattered across this place. You don't have to, but you can. And then you win. It's like, what did you win? Like, I'm sure the world will rebuild. I'm sure you'll get it there eventually. But like, even in your win, you didn't really win. It's a Pyrrhic victory at best.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
and that's our list.
Yeah, and but then demonstrating like what was the value of that, and like the value is like coming together, even though the world that you kind of fought for is lost already. And again, like he's your opposition to all of that, and that just like completes that narrative and what the game was trying to accomplish. And I think that that's what a good villain does.
Mm.
And a 4-stage final boss fight with a 4-stage complete 14-minute movement of organ music, and then obviously the finale with Dancing Mad. Total package wise, it's hard to go wrong. So some people might not have him as their number one. Hilariously, all four of us did.
Damn.
I thought about changing mine, but I don't do that anymore. So whatever the list is, and I was like, well, especially when it was going to be us talking about it, and I'm like, well, there's not going to be a lot of diversity on this one because all of our number ones are the same.
Yeah, it's great.
But maybe that means
I
something.
love it. It's because we have good taste,
Yes.
clearly.
Exactly.
We like clowns.
Because all of our number ones are not the same on the other list we have coming up this month, or the Kingdom Heart music list we're going to do. That's going to be coming up around, I think, the week of Christmas. I haven't decided when they're going to be used, but they're going to roll out sometime this month. So just as a quick programming reminder, again, we'll do these videos throughout the month of December while we're off for the holidays and stuff like that. We'll have one every Tuesday. We'll start the best 25 male characters next week, go 25 to 11, 10 to 1 after that, and then go to the list of the female characters to end the year, and then to start the year, a two-parter when we look at the best of 2024. So all the content is coming. It's some of the stuff we like doing the most. We hope you join us for the ride. Any final words from our panel?
No, I'm going to look at the villain, my list later and be like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so didn't make the list, but maybe we can follow up with that as a recap down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty happy with the list though. There was nobody that I was like, okay, how did this person get on there? Or I disagree completely. I thought it all really made sense, and I'm pretty happy with the order too. So
And if we had done this 10 years ago, there would have been a couple on the list that would have been like, what? And that's just because different people voting, less to choose from.
Well, to your point, looking back at our characters list before, I was like, I don't think this list holds up.
It's not a good list.
I'm glad we did it when we did it, but I don't love these lists. And I think we did not fall victim to that in this list.
I think our best games list was very good for the time.
Yep.
There was the Star Fox outlier because of Gary. But besides that, the top 25, I think, holds up pretty well. Our character list didn't, so you're going to see a big-time transformation because you've probably noticed if you're watching, there's that whole previous column. We didn't have this list before, so that's empty for now. You're going to want to see how much some of those have changed since the last time we did this list. Obviously, any characters that weren't around 10 years ago weren't ranked, but some of the ones who were are going to have a precipitous fall ahead of them.
And it's because and maybe many others, the approach just changed completely.
Yeah.
And I think it should have. And it's reflected in this list. I think that's why it's so strong.
It'll be a list that stands the test of time, and then 10 years from now, we'll do it again, and we'll see how it compares at that point. So 2034, please stay tuned for that.
Yep.
I'll hopefully actually easily be able to have 25 characters.
Yeah, maybe, unless you take another 10 years on
sorry.
Elden Ring.
Well, we also got to get her to knock out some other games in between that aren't 70 hours.
Yeah.
That would help, too.
I think that's key.
Yeah. Oh my God.
play fucking, I don't know, The Walking Dead.
Well, yeah, I'm playing
That's
Silent Hill too now.
There you
so.
go. Get like a 10 or 20 hour one in the mix there to get a few of them off your list, and then go back to some other 100-hour one you haven't played yet.
Yeah.
Don't play Refantasio for a while.
Yeah, that was...
All right, that's it for this episode. In between shows, you can find us at our website, grayareas.live or youtube.com/@grayareaslive. There's all the visual stuff, including some Easter eggs and the pro cons if you watch along, but the podcast will be there for you too. We will see you next week.